This is Marcus Whitney's audio universe.
Like, you gotta do the work. You gotta show up and just do the work.
What's up? What's up? Welcome to another episode of Marcus Whitney Live. I think we finally worked out all the kinks on all this stuff, with much thanks to my guest for today, my man, the futurist, marketer, entrepreneur, technologist, and just all around good guy, my man, QuHarrison Terry. Q, what's good, my man?
Yo, what's up, y'all? I'm great. I'm still quarantined in the pandemic, but besides that, I'm staying busy in the house.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So look, it's really good to spend some time with you today. You're one of the people who I really focused on talking to a lot when all this stuff hit, just because you're so you're so dialed in to the connection from where we are right now to where we're going.
Right.
And I just had to kind of figure out where your head was at about everything. And we talked a lot about creating content. We talked a lot about, industries that were going to go up, industries that were going to go down. In the show notes, I'll list all Q's, bona fides. But for people who don't know, in addition to sort of, running his own media company for a while, he is also head of all things marketing at the Mark Cuban Companies. And so, Q is tapped into a lot of real things. Q's tapped into a lot of real things. It's kind of the easiest way to say it. So why don't we just start with talking about the pandemic and the process you went through, with your own properties and your own ventures and initiatives when you first realized this was going to be a really, really serious thing. So let's go back 8 weeks from today.
Well, it goes even further back for me. I think 8 weeks ago we were in the pandemic, but I was actually in Asia in December, right? So I was, every year I go to Japan and Tokyo, and just kind of that's the end of the year for me. It's the creative reset. And I just like going to Tokyo for that reason. So I'm in Japan, and, I'm getting travel advisories, you can't go to Wuhan, China, blah, blah, blah. And I was tracking it even before I got there, because Wuhan was already a thing, but I at the time didn't understand how serious things could get. And I think a lot of people are also in that bucket. And then, Japan, you see a lot of people coming from China. They do have the face mask, and they are that's just Asia culture. So I'm seeing that. I'm like, all right, cool. Face masks, where I was desensitized to face masks being in Asia. So I kind of understood, when things got real, you need to have the essentials, face mask, stocked up, and have all the things that you need to succeed. So I'm seeing that. And then I come back to America in January, go to CES, cool, everything works out, link up and go to a couple voice conferences and things of that nature. Everything works out. And then bam, things started to get canceled. So Mobile World Congress, I was supposed to go to that, canceled. And I was like, all right, why? Because this pandemic? Okay. So then we're like, all right, we're going to catch it. This is just one little casualty. We're going to catch the next one. They're going to figure it all out.
Right.
So then was it IWA, or the International Auto Show, got canceled in Switzerland. They were going to move it to another place. That got canceled. Then South by Southwest gets canceled. And at that point, I was just like, dang, this thing is just going to be much bigger. It is going to come. It's inevitably going to come to the US, and we got to be ready. And so at the time, we started talking, and I was just like, look, man, stock up. We're going to be in the house for a minute, spread the word, make sure you're checking on family, make sure they're straight, do what you can. But things are going to get worse before it gets better. And that was, I think, about at least 8 to 10 weeks ago.
Right.
Me and you had that conversation. And since then, we've been in the house, and it's not great, but we're here, and the world has changed. When the world changed, I had to rethink how I even thought about, just doing business on all sides, right? Everything that I do, was somewhat correlated to traveling somewhere, or networking per se, or relationship building. And our skills, I think I was a little bit more adept at building digital relationships just by the nature of the work that I had done. But it still didn't give me any advantage on, how to relate and have emphasize with people that are still very much in a pandemic, right? And that's the difference between now and a lot of other times where you've got to think quick on your feet. Is like, you have to think quick on your feet, but you have to also be uh, cautious and responsible for, others' feelings in a time of a pandemic, more so than any other time, because you don't know what happened in someone else's life, and they might still be pushing on because they need the money even more so now than they ever did before.
Right.
But they, like, everyone's in a weird state, so I've kind of hit a seclusion. Like, I've been using this as an oasis to, like, do all the things that I haven't been able to do, explore some of the paths that, I hadn't been able to nerd out on, think about things a little bit deeper that required more time, and that's been grateful. So that's Q in a pandemic.
Yeah, man. I just want to tap into the thing that you said about the empathy. I write I'm committed to writing a weekly newsletter, right?
Right.
And it's my most personal work. It's it taps into creativity and entrepreneurship, but I try to go to the inner workings of those things.
Right.
And I'm trying to think if I've ever had a more difficult task in terms of communication than writing the last 8 weeks of my newsletter. You know what I mean? Because, I would write it and I would step away from it and I'd come back to it and I'd be like, man, like, no, that sentence is inappropriate. You know what I mean? Like, this sentence is inappropriate. And then there's like those occasions where you kind of have to just take a risk and say something and hope that people know where your intent is, and, and don't take it personally. But you're right. When you're writing to thousands of people, some people are writing to millions of people, right? But when you're communicating with thousands of people, you're guaranteed in this pandemic that some of the people that you're communicating with have been severely affected by what's happening right now. And adjusting communication for that is a challenge, is for sure a challenge. As a marketer, what has been your experience? In your personal stuff, you've been able to sort of take a hiatus, but I know, like, all your work has not been able to take a hiatus. So talk about some of the things that you've actually done, maybe just some of the reactive things you all have done, but I know you've also done some proactive things, all in challenge and other things of that nature. So
Yeah. On the marketing side, it's pretty expensive. I mean, working with Mark Cuban during this time has been, uh, I would say, life changing, right? Most people get to work with a person that they admire or look up to, and it's under maybe normal circumstances. But when you get a chance to do both, and you get the normal, like, this is what leadership looks like, but then wartime, this is what leadership looks like. I've just been able to get an MBA in quite a few things, I would say, in a shorter period of time. And just stepping up to those challenges required me to step back from a lot of things that I knew would also take a deep toll on me. And I had to get real serious, 10, 12 weeks ago, and say, like, am I going to be a guy that makes it through this? Or am I going to be a guy that, didn't really focus when, the clock said, yo, it's time to focus. And on the company side, just doing whatever I can to help the company make it through this unfortunate strain of events, or string of events. And what that entails is, for some companies, it's helping them with PPP, right? One of those things is, again, relationships. If you've got relationships that others don't have, and you can kind of extend a helping hand, helping our portfolio, get up to speed and caught up on the status of that. And that was something that I spent quite a bit of time on.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing is being able to be that quick thinker for others when they might not know how to pivot. The world changes, and when the world changes, sometimes a lot of people get left behind, and all they needed was just a nudge, or for someone to pop up and say, hey, what if we tried this? And a lot of this is just trial and experimentation right now. There's no set thing that works. This is definitely a black swan event. Things have been shut down. Things have been up and down, like the market and other entities. There's no sure things right now. And when you have that much uncertainty, you just have to put your thinker cap on and say, like, all right, if this happens, what do we do? If that happens, what do we do? And you really just setting the pace from a marketing standpoint and getting a little bit more tactical. That breaks down into, pausing all digital ad campaigns at first, not to leave them paused forever, but to check those campaigns. Look at all the copy that we have. Look at the messaging that we have, and ask ourselves, is this sensitive to the times that we are currently facing as humanity and as humans. And that was tricky, because sometimes you've got to, there's not many times in the middle of a quarter someone's going to call you and say, all right, pause everything, we're going to rerun it, but we got to like go through it and filter out what we don't feel is on brand.
Yeah.
And looking at where there might be new opportunities, right? Like during this pandemic, there have been some things that have grown tremendously. Teleconferencing is one of them. So you see Zoom and all the video subsequential apps that have followed. You have commerce. E-commerce is just skyrocketed. You know, you can now do things on e-commerce that just would have taken years, if not, decades to make happen. Like, I bought my first major piece of technology on the internet. I've never done that, right?
Right.
I bought the new iPad Pro that Apple released through a press release. Never done before. Like, Apple releasing a net new product through a press release,
Yeah.
And so these are things where it's like, I'm the guy that likes the experience, going to the store, buying it. If you got to wait in line, calling your friend and saying, yo, go wait in line for me, and like doing all that. Like, I was there for the thrill of it. I wasn't there for the easy press a button and just track it on USPS. And so there's been a lot of things that have changed on the commerce side, even for vendors, right? Not only on the consumer side, but for vendors, now they have to think about, what products are you discounting? What products do you place on Amazon? Do you have the inventory? How are you shipping? How do you deal with, demand and you not having the actual inventory? So I've been working on a lot of challenges like that. More broadly speaking, helping Mark with whatever he needs help with. And that's how my day job goes. I mean, it's not ever a dry day there, which I'm grateful for, but there's definitely days where I definitely need the rest, because I know that it's going to be a test the day after.
So one of the questions I just have for you in your role at Mark Cuban Companies is, Mark's portfolio of companies is very diverse, right? There's obviously pro sports. Many people know about that, but people also know his origin was in technology at broadcast.com, right? And so he's got, technology in the portfolio. I think also from Shark Tank, there's obviously, some consumer packaged goods that are in the portfolio. What have you sort of seen across different industries from that actual ownership portfolio management perspective? And also, have you been able to sort of leverage the internet layer capabilities that you all have to support the businesses that maybe before were not as dependent on the internet?
Yeah. So your first question, I'm not sure I fully understand, but the second one, I definitely understand. And yes, we always are taking advantage of the latest and greatest internet tactics and digital marketing tactics. Even in some cases utilizing AI to do innovative things as well. So Mark's very much a future thinker, on the sense of like, if something's emerging, let's go and learn everything we can about that thing that's emerging, and let's leverage it to our advantage in whatever way we possibly can. If it doesn't work, oh well, but if it works, we'll all be happy in that. So
maybe a better way to state the question is, have you seen from the position of having these holdings, certain industries that have just sort of jumped off a cliff in terms of like, things have
like
just
trends.
Yeah.
So it definitely gives us a position where we can see, but I think that's not a unique position to us. It's any investor really, especially in the venture capital side, where you're not as heavily focused on one sector or industry. You're going to see those trends very fast, very readily. Fred Wilson, I'm not sure if you read
of course,
his blog.
ABC, of course.
Yes. So like Fred does a really good job of, just giving that prescient take. And it's like, I never thought about it. Like the Etsy stuff, he called that way before they announced it in their earnings, right? He was like, yeah, Etsy, like they're encouraging their people. And then the 2 or 4 weeks later, you hear on CNBC, Etsy, 2x growth, and the stock soars. So that happens all the time.
Yeah. So at this point, we're sort of settling into the reality of this moment in time. Have any things sort of popped up that have you really, really excited about the future?
Yeah, I mean, I got a chance to reset on Inevitable Human, which was, my little macrocosm on the internet. Where...
So for my audience who may not know, I'm a subscriber, so I'm happy to hear that. But like,
okay.
but just break down what Inevitable Human was, and maybe sort of what you're thinking about going forward.
Yeah, so Inevitable Human was a space that I created on the internet where we talked about the future and its impact on our lives. But instead of just talking about like the future of something, we went really, really niche and like expanded on what a possible future will look like. Closest comparable, I think the everyday person probably could understand is like, think of how Star Trek would have an episode and it'd be tied to a theme, or think of how Black Mirror has episodes tied to technology. We were a lot less dystopian and more like, here's an optimistic view of how this technology could be used. Maybe too optimistic in some cases, right? Like I've definitely gotten that feedback. But the way I've thought about it was, Inevitable Human existed, and it was really all based on this world pre-COVID. When COVID happened, pretty much all of my work became questionable because
Yeah.
it had this assumption that, this Black Swan event wouldn't happen. And that was the way I got over that. And this was a tough decision to make really fast, but I ended up making it fairly quickly. And I broke it down into two categories. We've made all this great work, but most of that great work is pretty much vitamins. They're not necessarily the actual painkiller that people need when they have an acute problem or pain. And the vitamins, you can sell vitamins and do numbers, I'm sure, but if you have the choice, why not sell the painkiller? Because it's a guaranteed hit, right? And I saw this opportunity as a time to pause and say, okay, we've got these vitamins and they're great vitamins. People love them, but let's take them off the market for a second and let's see what painkillers that we can have. And what that meant is I needed to take the time to go very, very deep in a lot of industries and say, what is the future of this industry? And I probably don't have the answers. I probably have anecdotes. I probably have visions, but I need to go speak with the experts. And so the next evolution of Inevitable Human is coming soon. We're working with some pretty fun people from all different spectrums. Most people have kind of seen some of the stuff I've been messing around with in the deep fake realm. We've got some cool stuff happening there. We've got some cool things happening within the cloud kitchen space that we're working on.
Okay.
And we're looking at all these industries that have emerged because of this string of events. And now what does a future look like reimagined? And probably about two weeks out, I would say for sure, from that announcement. And then pretty much all summer we'll be having something for people to check into. So
that's
we'll
fantastic.
be back soon.
I'm glad because I'm kind of missing my fix from it. So
you'll have way too much. Like we're having right now. I have the problem where it's like we've got too many. We got to produce quite a few.
Yeah.
So you'll have more than enough. But we'll. Yeah.
So you were talking about that you designed Inevitable Human with the mindset that the Black Swan event wouldn't happen.
Right.
Have you since like started reading Nassim Taleb or things like that? Like, have you sort of been like, okay, uncertainty is the most certain thing, or like how has this changed you? Like, I hadn't thought to ask you that before you said that, but now that you've said that, I have that question. Has this changed your sense of the inevitability of the uncertain future?
No, I still think that way. What I realized though is the optimistic me. I wasn't creating any value thinking like that during this time, right? Like
right.
You're not adding any value to someone's life when you're saying like, yo, Marcus, like someone you may know might be illy impacted by this horrible thing, and that might be heavy in your mind. But I want to talk to you about brain computer interfaces. You'd be like, fuck out of here, QuHarrison. Like, straight up, that's what it would be, right? Like, sorry, I know this is a children's show.
No, it's not. It's not. You're good.
That's straight up how you would be to me, right? You'd be like, well, let's talk about this in 6 months.
Right.
And I didn't want to be that guy. And so what changed is I had to, like, even on my own team, it had to change like leadership styles, right? Like you go from being able to align people easily around core objectives, KPIs, OKRs, and I had to throw all that stuff out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's not. This is tough, and I think it's definitely a privilege because sometimes there are numbers you got to hit no matter what. But sometimes you got to ask yourself, what are you going to lose? Like, what is the cost of hitting that number? And to me, the cost wasn't worth taking any of my teams so far past the ledge just because uncertainty hit that they would not be themselves. Because what got you there is your team members feeling some level of comfortness in their skill sets and their abilities, and you all gel and you play. I mean, we all saw what the best version of that looks like with the Last Dance documentary that ESPN has recently ran. And so for me, to answer your question, what changed was two things. One, I've always been a extrovert. Like I've always been a guy that goes out, party starter, conversationalist. COVID, whenever you're on lockdown, the first couple weeks, man, it was brutal because I was like, damn, like I'm so bored, blah, blah, blah. And then I was thinking, I'm like, dude, I'm all in my head. I'm bored. Like this ain't me. Like, boredom is for people that aren't creative, right? Like the creativity is the killer of boredom, right? Like if you're creative, then like COVID should be like the best time. And when I changed that perspective, that changed everything. That's when I got back in my bag and started creating and started implementing. And I think that's when I started to even find like a deeper, I would say like the work I'm making right now is probably some of the best work, mainly because it has cohesiveness and it has thoughtfulness, and it also is very strategic in the sense of like it resonates with the times. Beforehand, I might have only had 2 of 3 or 1 of 3, and like it was still good work, but COVID changed me and it changed the way I create, and I'm grateful for that. COVID also changed the way that this is harder to. COVID made me think more about life and loved ones and what that really means on the purpose side. I think until you get an uncertain event like this, where it makes you question, like, was that the last conversation I might have had in person with that person?
Yep.
Is that something I'm comfortable with? What did I change? Or, it makes you think about how insensitive and reckless things can be, and how, like, we as marketers are mainly responsible for that. Like, if we
establish the culture. We establish the culture.
Exactly. If we establish the culture and we say that the paradigm is one way and everybody follows it, and then the day after we change the paradigm is this. I mean, the greatest example of this is the mask fiasco. For the longest time, marketers were like, yeah, no, like no mask needed, no mask necessary, because we were trying to keep them for the healthcare workers, which, I understand, cut off the hand to save the body. But when you have a chance to keep the body, now you're trying to reattach this hand and tell everybody like that mask are necessary.
Right.
Cats are like,
ping pong,
nah,
and
man.
People don't trust.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so
I knew that was going to happen too. Like that was early on. That was my first big distrusting signal, right? Because it doesn't, like, if you're in healthcare and you've spent enough time researching infectious diseases, viruses, things of this nature, they're pretty much all airborne because of the way that stuff travels in the air. It's just you know that, and so you knew we were gonna need masks eventually, but you knew that the reason why we weren't doing that is because we couldn't have that narrative out there at the same time as we had the healthcare workers need PPE narrative, right? The two couldn't. We didn't have a cohesive narrative for the two, so we were like shaming people for like hoarding masks, and now we're shaming people for not wearing masks, right? You know what I mean? It's just
Super
deep.
Crazy.
It's just deep.
Yeah. It is. So, I mean, I personally, I stopped really thinking heavily on COVID because, like, once it hit, it was like, this has happened.
Yeah.
Now, like, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And I've been shifting myself more so to a support role, helping, family members, loved ones, colleagues, friends, whatever, like whoever needs support. And if I can give them a helping hand, or, I can, support their business, right now is the time where we can step up and do that. And like, I've been trying to be more so a leader in my personal life in that regard. And then even spending time with like people you just wouldn't, and getting creative about it. Like, I'm like, for me, the new social experiences, we're back in Black Ops, we're back in Call of Duty, right? Like we're back.
Yeah.
We're back on the video games. Like I hadn't played video games since like 2012, right? Like not because I didn't want to, it was just because, I hadn't had time, and 9 times out of 10, I'd be hanging out with someone in person versus digitally. But now, that is the new hangout spot. That's the new club. For sure. So
my PS4 is getting a lot more use right now than it has in a while.
It's cool to hop on the games with your buddies and like, just kick back and relax for a couple seconds, even if it's only a couple games, like, it's still fun.
Yeah.
I was impressed by what Tory Lanez did with Quarantine Radio.
Yeah.
It was pretty vulgar and explicit. I mean, it made it to the front page of the New York Times. So and it got him quite a few deals. So it's sometimes thinking outside the box. Like I look at like what happened with Quarantine Radio and what he built there on Instagram, and the fact that he even got Mark Zuckerberg to change their live streaming policy for like this guy. Like Mark Zuckerberg barely even changes the policy for the government. You think he was just going to change it for some rapper out of Toronto? Like, it was kind of like quarantine has showed us like new things that we just would have never expected.
Yeah.
And like I look at that and I say, okay, like Quarantine Radio today, the D-Nice DJ sets today, but that's probably the future of Health Further tomorrow.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's where we are. That's where we are. I mean, that's why, you talked about just tinkering, experimenting. I mean, that's all this is, right? This is just like real time, push through, try to do it, because the reality is that this setup that I have here would have easily cost $100,000 20 years ago. Like, it just would have.
Yeah.
And it couldn't have fit in this room, right? You know what I mean? And so it's like, you have this opportunity. I think everyone's going to really freak out now that the Joe Rogan news is out, and everyone was already launching a podcast. Now it's like, it's going to be super podcasts out there, but it's really about who is thinking about how their content can actually shape culture. And B, I think to a large degree, a painkiller. Like to me, D-Nice was a painkiller. That was not a vitamin. Like people were in these chronic modes of fear and stress, and just having an Instagram channel that we could all log into and hear just really good music, and seeing somebody who cared about the craft and everybody just like chatting. To me, that was not a vitamin. To me, that was like needed. You know what I mean? Like by humanity, that was needed. And so thinking about how we can create content that is needed right now is really the lane I'm experimenting with.
Got you. That's sick. I mean, that's the way to think about it. If you had asked me, it's like, one, what is a painkiller? Define it. And then can you create it, or can you add to it, or can you bring it to others?
All right, man. Final note, because I want to respect your time, and I'm a little bit over time.
You're fine.
Okay, cool. Any what you're always good for me, among many other things, is like pointing me in a certain direction, right? To kind of like look into this area, right? There's whole things I didn't know about without talking to you about. So do you have one for me, plus everyone else who's currently like watching and listening?
The future. So we're going to talk about the future right now, man. What do you want on what industry? Because I got a lot. Where do you want to go? Like, what's going to be helpful for you right now?
Something that everybody can like can relate to. So something broad and general that is going to have an impact on everybody. That's not obvious right now, not here right today, but like is for in your belief is for sure coming. Okay, good.
So early in the conversation, I talked about being in Asia and realizing that like masks, like they're a part of the social fabric, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I were a young innovator right now and I didn't have anything, but I had ideas, I would probably be thinking about how to make masks cool, because there was a person and companies that made sneakers cool and footwear cool. There are people that have even made travel gear cool. The next wave of what fashion looks like, or the next wave of like what that brand that we all know and love. So like the next Nike will probably be a mask company. And there's a few out there that, I'm looking at, like B2 mask. It's interesting because it has a vibe to it, but I don't see too many females rocking the B2 mask. It just looks too manly, right?
Okay.
I understand that. But then you've got funny and creative mask that, you can put on and they changes the way your face looks and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You're gonna have the geeky mask. Like I've got a mask that looks like Bane from Batman, right?
Right.
Filtration system,
yep,
and all that stuff. But it's got that macho. Like if you can't wear that mask if you ain't got no muscles on you, right? You're gonna look a little scrawny. Right? It's one of those things where I think mask culture and removing the stigma's already been like the first finish has been ripped off. There's a few more layers that like I still wear a mask because it's the right, sensible thing to do, in my opinion. But there's a lot of people that still look at me like who is that dude? Like, and then they're like,
man, like, trust me, I'm feeling it out there in public, man. Yeah. Like I'm rocking the mask. It's like, You know, it's an
Yeah, on
issue.
top of that, we're
but
African
black,
American
dude.
men. Yeah, we're
Speak
African
on it.
American
Speak
men
on it,
rocking
man.
masks.
Speak on it.
Like,
how about going
in
running?
the South.
How about going jogging right now? Post Ahmad with like a mask on. It's like, dude.
And you live in the South, you probably have a knife on you because you probably got like a little dog or something that's gonna run up on you, right? Like you're gonna protect yourself, right? Like so it's like, you know, like the stigma of what we've known to be true, and like now this world, there's too much ambiguity there,
right?
And the people that.
So hold on, I want to cut you off because like you just said something that made me realize something, that this fashion could actually be it could be a painkiller, like, because for some of us like wearing these masks is like a problem. This is like, you know, it's like an issue. So it could be necessary to make them give off the vibe that this is not dangerous, this is not an affront to you, this is fun, this person is wow.
And there's different hoodies, right? Like you could go out in an all black hoodie and like the perception of you changes drastically. You could go out in a zip up hoodie and the perception of you changes also drastically.
Right. It's more Mark Zuckerberg when it's in the right.
And the other is a gangster, right? You're a thug. Like, and that's just what the media has done. Now you've got this mask, and you know, even in California, I see some of my homies that are rocking masks. They're just putting the bandana on, and like maybe that's all they got. And if that's what you got, that's cool. But we come from an era when you see a red or a black or a blue bandana, that means something much different.
That's right. That's right.
I'm protecting myself.
That's right.
And I think you have to get over that right now. And the innovators that think about destigmatizing that and making that cool, kind of like, and I've seen some efforts by Nike, but I don't think it's actually going to come from a Nike. It's going to be someone like, remember the hijabs, the active hijabs that were created? I don't remember the innovator's name, but she recognized that there were a group of people like her out there that wanted to do things that were contemporary, yet still on tradition for what she valued at a cultural level. Thus, they create the active wear and design a hijab. And, you know, I think even Nike co-signed it eventually. Mm-hmm. But you have to have that vision. That vision and those visionaries are right now. And like, if I'm going to throw a couple ideas, I'm not going to do any of these. I'll throw some out. Like, the way I think about it is, you know, computer vision's completely changed because of the mask. So like when I look at my phone and try to unlock it, that's not going to happen.
Right. Computer vision is like, it's like Face ID for people.
Face ID,
Samsung's ID,
Face Unlock and all that stuff. So whenever you try, or Windows Hello, like there's a lot of people with computers with the facial. So facial recognition, and then computer vision as a model too, because think about the AI basis or behind like Ring or behind like any of these threat detection softwares that might run on like a Walmart security system, right? And or, you know, your airports or whatever. A lot of those data sets were trained that if you've got all this gear on, you're a threat.
The bias is baked into the model.
Rightfully so, though, right? Because what we had as a definition of, you know, maybe and some people would say terrorist, some people would say, you know, I would just use that word because it's strong enough and people understand it, right? Yeah. Some people would say this is what a terrorist looked like, and that stigma was there. Now, when everyone looks like that, you've got so many false positives. You kind of got to change the whole understanding. And there's also a practical use, right? Like, so Face ID is like a practical use. We went to an era where I can unlock my phone with my face or biometric properties, and that allows me to quickly access and have a secure space. Now, if I have to remove my mask, which I'm not going to do, I can't easily unlock my phone. So now I have to punch in, you know, a long query of numbers or characters. And that's going to be problematic. But then you go to other spaces. You know, I put my mask on, and I try to talk on the phone or have a conversation. That's not going to work for the future, right? So now we have to think about it. Like, maybe you run, because the mask hooks behind your ear, maybe you can put a wire in that, right? And you can do bone conduction, or even they have throat microphones. That's what the SWAT teams use when they're in combat. Like, what if we can take that same technology, which has existed for I think 20 plus years now, and implement that in this mask? And that fits the timeline, right? Like, the military had GPS for tens of years before the civilian use case of it worked out for Google Maps and our iPhones and all that stuff. And or the remember the small GPS?
TomToms,
right? Like,
of course.
Yeah, like the military had that way before we did.
Yeah.
But when we got it, it was cool, and it sparked a whole new era of mobility. Like I could get in my car and just drive state to state,
Right.
and I don't need to call, my aunt or my uncle and try to navigate all these spaces. So communication is going to change with the mask, right?
Mm-hmm.
The digitization of the mask is going to happen, right? Like, what is the AirPods equivalent for mask? We haven't seen that yet. And these sound like hardware problems, but if I've learned anything about masks, it seems like Etsy sold a lot of handmade masks. So a lot of people that have ideas, now is that opportunity for you to get in front of it and think about PPE or how people can be more hygiene conscious in the next couple months, years, and decades to come, because this is going to be a different era where if you go to Romania, if you go to South America, if you go to Africa, if you go to the United States, there's going to be now something you probably see in all those countries and continents, and that's going to be a mask.
Okay, that was perfect. On that note, Q, you're the man. Everybody follow Q online. He's on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. You see everything up there. If you're listening to this from the podcast, you'll be able to grab all this information from the show notes. Dude is just a wealth of knowledge, inspiration, and insight. Also, obviously, subscribe to my podcast, Marcus Whitney's Audio Universe. You can find it on iTunes. You can find it on Google Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify. And finally, you can follow me pretty much everywhere. I am Marcus Whitney. Just as is, you can just Google me as well. So anyway, Q, I want to thank you for being a part of this this first finally got it right live stream, and also for
Wonderful.
everything that you've just done for me in terms of like guiding me in this process. Man, I just appreciate you so much, man.
Of course, man. It's a pleasure, and keep having fun with it. That's all we can do right now. Keep yourself entertained.
That's it, man. That's it. All right, y'all. Peace.